Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going well this morning.
Yeah.
I was just trying to get all logged in and I thought I was having problems, but
Right. Yeah, you should be able to share your screen if you need. I'm assuming you probably need to. I don't think you should have any problem doing that. Is it just you presenting, or is there somebody presenting with you? Or
just me presenting.
okay, all right, awesome. Yep, awesome, good.
Just getting all my windows separated out here. The one thing that's annoying about the Google Slides is it takes over your whole screen if you share it.
Oh yeah, true.
So I like to have my chat window up over here on one side, my participant list up. So
Yeah, I've got my work from home setup is I've got a big 30-inch monitor over here, and then my MacBook sits here. So I'm using the camera from the MacBook, but everything else is up on this big screen. So I've got Zoom over here, so that when I look at the Zoom screen, I'm actually looking at the camera, but everything else is over here. So I do have to look over here most of the time, but it works out.
good deal. I guess we're at the top of the hour here.
Yep. Adam, I'm going to go ahead and mute you real quick, just in case we just don't want to kind of prevent any interference.
Sure thing. I've got a secondary mute on my headphones too that's always on.
Okay. All right. That's fine.
Do what you need to, man.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to make sure you knew that you weren't muted. So we've had instances before where somebody didn't know they were unmuted and were like yelling at their kids or
100% with you.
Yeah. Okay.
I haven't done that yet. But
Okay.
he's behind me eating breakfast.
Yelled at your kids,
Awesome.
or?
Yeah, exactly right.
Well, Ryan, anytime you're ready to go. I don't know if we want to wait for more people to show up or
Okay,
what,
great.
Yeah, I'm good when you are.
Well, I didn't know how this works for introductions or whatnot, so I'll just
there's
go ahead and get started.
I can introduce you if you want, but
No, that's good.
I think you're probably good to go. I just want to let everybody know that we are recording, so this will be available afterward, like hopefully all the other Zoom sessions are. And if you are joining, make sure you have your mic muted if you're not talking, or however you want to mute yourself on your end, just make sure you mute it during the presentation until we get to a Q&A part, and that's up to Ryan when he wants to do that. So anyway, take it away.
Yeah, so I'm trying a few things out new today. It's going against a little bit of my my standard sessions, but hey, we're doing all this virtual session stuff, a lot of us for the first time, or a lot of us totally virtual for the first time. So I do have a couple of interactives that we'll have here, as you saw when you kind of got in. I'm trying out the woo clap stuff a little bit. And my name's Ryan Shrink, and I work for the Montana Digital Academy. And we're located in Missoula, Montana, and we serve the online high school as the online supplemental online program for the state of Montana, mostly high school. And that part of our program is state funded. The high school portion that we do for credit, we serve all the schools in the state as a supplemental offering. We're not our own standalone high school. Some of you from Montana may be familiar with us and know kind of what we do. And then that program, we report a score, we hire all of our teachers as Montana certified teachers. They serve Montana public school students that enroll through their local school to us. We provide a score that then goes into their transcript at their local school. So we're not a standalone school, but we're very much supplemental in nature, class or two at a time, and following our own course calendar and schedule for a fall, a spring, and a couple of summer sessions. We've been around for a while, and one of the programs that I'm fortunate enough to run is separately funded through private funding, and it's called the Ed Ready Montana program. And today I have two sessions that I'm doing. The one in the morning here, I want to talk a little bit about what we did to start that program. And the other is going to be a little bit more theoretical, research based on the how and why. And Wes Fryer, he gave me some inspiration today, talking a little bit about some of the things that he was talking about in his session, and some of the research and findings behind what he was discussing. And so I'll hop into it today. And this morning is very much is more of the what we did. So I'm going to pop over into, I'm going to make sure I can get this going here. But let's see. Looks like we're already into the gaps and gains link. Everybody's already firing up the WooClap. But if you go to www.wooclap.com and gaps and gains, which is what we're going to be talking about this morning, and add to the first question there on what's on your mind for student learning gaps going into fall of 2020. That's how I wanted to kick it off. And it looks like we have previous gaps, influences, retaining, some great stuff there. So that's what I wanted to start off with, what's on your mind. And what's on our mind is a lot of what's in the news right now. It's what we're seeing on almost a daily basis, a new article coming out, and changing landscape around us, underneath us, within us, and us all having to deal with that. So here's just a couple of headlines that I pulled out that, for a couple of presentations that we've been doing recently, but from the New York Times, Forbes, Washington Post, and then I really liked this one. The results are in for remote learning. It didn't work. And this one's from the Wall Street Journal a little while ago. And then throw in, and it's odd that the conspiracy theories and all the things that Wes was talking about this morning, but one of the slides that I put together, just go out and do a search on media bias. And this was just the Google search that I did this morning on media bias. And you've all seen the pictures if you've been following along on social media or whatever it might be, but where everybody falls in media bias. And that's not even considering then what's going on in your feeds. And oddly enough, I planned to talk about this before he talked about it earlier today, but I don't want to introduce you to my crazy cousin or any fortune-telling classmates of mine that or former classmates, but you have enough of your own to do that. And so what we kind of see ourselves as in my program and the team that I have is we're here to just help people kind of take a deep breath. And we know that this meme came across mine this morning. This is one that I saw of a principal friend of mine that he posted this and everybody had a good laugh. But it really is a high stress time. There's a lot of there's a lot of things that are not nailed down, and everything it seems like that we decide we're going to do changes next week depending on how things all go. So what we've kind of tried to be in our program is the professional that comes in and helps you take a little bit of a deep breath. So take a second deep breath. Let's just pause for just a second. And what we are here as distance educators and leaders in distance education to bring about is productive change and a productive approach to something that most of us that have been working in this field for a long time have been saying since we started in it, that it's not easy, that there is no silver bullet, there is no magic elixir. You don't get to a goal. You're continually building from level to level, adjusting as you go, and doing just what all educators do from the first moment they step into their classroom, and always strive to deliver the perfect lesson. You never quite get there. You have some good days, you have some bad days, you have some things that you get better at, but you never make the perfect performance. And so the field is informing us of this and reminding us on also on a daily basis. So instead of reading the media reports about how everything's not working, I tend to focus on what is working, what from distance educators, what are we informing each other about, and what can our leaders do now? What can we as leaders do, whether it's in an individual classroom or leading a whole program? What can we do now to really inform our instruction and inform our teachers, our colleagues, our staff members on how we can solve this very unique problem of not only do we have a summer loss of skills, especially in the math arena, which can be then applied in a lot of different subjects, but what are we going to do because of the difficult times that we had educating kids and doing this when we all went to emergency remote learning, if that was the path that you or at least went down for a little while. So that leads me to my second question. It looks like I got logged out of my Moodle, so I got to go back in here. Oh, there we go. That's what I was looking for. So if you go to the second question then, what levels are you serving for fall? Who are you serving? What are you trying to serve? Get an idea of a few of you from here. Are you training educators? Are you working in higher education? Are some of you middle school? Great. Adult learners? School districts? K-12 level, professional? We've got a little bit of everything in our crowd. That's great. I don't know why that goes away. Still getting an idea about this. Okay. All right, so it's very much what we do. So talk to you a little bit about what we did as a response to this. So we knew going into, in Montana, we had 2 weeks where at the beginning of March timeframe, we were all sitting around, we got sent home where there was a stay-at-home order, and we knew from our governor that schools were going to open up again in 2 weeks. And we needed to prepare for remote learning. It was unprecedented, right? We're all sitting there, and many of you were in the same boat, but looking back, it seems like it was a year ago. It wasn't that long ago. And in some ways, it seems like it was 5 minutes ago because of all the work that we've done since then. But it was really unprecedented interruption to schools. We immediately got together in our team, posted a call out to people to say, what can we do to help you? And we had 100 schools reach out in the first 2 weeks to sign up for advising sessions with us on how they can approach the problem of going to remote learning. And that's evolved since those first 2 weeks and those 100 schools being those 100 schools plus the others that we're serving. And our program serves from upper elementary through adult education and higher education. So we have upper elementary, middle schools, high schools, and that's what we were asked to respond to. And the pivot to remote learning was very challenging for most. They knew that their students were going to have less exposure to math and English in the spring. we had early hints and discussions on this gaps and gains discussion that really has evolved over the summer, and also included pushing off our standardized testing from spring until fall of next year. So how are we going to prepare students that have to be ready to take those standardized tests, whether they're college placement tests or ACT, and then also talking about younger students and how are they going to be ready for the next level? How do we get them to a point where they're algebra ready? Or how do we get them to a point where they're ready to go on to the next level of math that we have for them because they had less exposure to math? And what about older students that weren't enrolled in math that are now having to gear up for their technical training program that they want to go into or higher education? So it really led us to our current effort, which is advising schools on how to set up for gaps and gains. And so we have this link here. There's a little bit of there's an infographic. This is what we're sending out to educators around our state to help them reach out to us to get ready, attending a webinar, attending a session with us. And we have a small team. We have a team of these 6 folks who we get together and plan what this is all going to look like and fill the gaps for one another to train these folks. Our program started in 2013 and has run up to now in piloting and rolling out math for a differentiated program that have these pieces. So we have, let's see, we have targeted and efficient goals in math. There's support for blended learning and online. The program itself creates an initial diagnostic centered around just a certain set of math skills that we set goals with educators to help meet those needs. And it identifies the gaps in a short assessment up front, and then creates a custom study path for students that delivers resources that teachers can guide them through and ways to assess those students before they get to the end of the class. And so we serve over 500 different affiliations statewide. We have about 6,000 active users in a month. And those users look like this over time. You can see that we had a fall off when COVID hit, but we still are serving students as the summer progresses. The students that we serve, about 3/4 of those are middle school and high school, and the rest adult ed, higher ed, and some alternative teaching and learning situations. So I want to get to a few of the questions here before I kind of get into some of the cases and use cases that we're experiencing and supporting. So let's see. Why did some children excel in online learning compared to in-person and other students struggle? And so one of the things that we're really building up with the teachers that we're working with is what is their plan to communicate with those students? And I believe there were multiple reasons. We could go into the reasons that are technical versus the reasons that are set up and what some of the schools can control. And so what we are really focusing on in our program and setting up for success are the teaching and learning side of this. And so I'm going to get into some of those items right now to help answer Mandy's question. And I'm looking at Melanie here. Shameless plug. Let's see. How classroom learning might be deficient. So, all right, it's going to give me a good chance to talk about a few things here. So, we really had 4 cases that we're supporting in our efforts, and And so what we're jumping into here, we have a summer program right now that is more parent-centered and teacher-supported. And what we found out about that program is just that importance of being able to communicate with those parents. And as a parent of 2 students that worked on the other side of my screen here with me this last spring, doing that for the first time while trying to also maintain the full-time job across the table, it's especially important that we communicate to those parents and realize they're almost like your teaching assistants. And so how do you communicate to them on what good teaching or good learning looks like from a student that's participating in a remote learning situation? So important to provide consistent calendar and expectations and schedule. And it can't just be a rough draft of a lesson plan outline that you send home with parents. And teachers have to be supported through that as well and realize that it's a totally different situation. And so we have an example at one of our middle schools here in our state that ran a successful parent-centered approach. We also have another one that I'm going to go into where every student grades 5 through 12 is set up to do an initial assessment on where their gaps are and what they can focus their instruction on in more of a school-centered or teacher-centered approach this summer. They're being proactive while the students are home to try to make up the gaps for their most at-risk students between the end of school in June and the startup of school again in August. And then we have some others that are working on test prep and some others that are working on English language arts skills. So just show you some of the aspects of what's important in each one of these. And then I want to make sure that we please ask some questions if you have about what we found that as far as critical aspects or concerns and things that have helped out in all of these situations. So in the summer math incentive programs, those form letters to parents, things that can help you and each one of your educators contact parents, let them know what the expectations are of the program. What does successful teaching and learning look like for a student and a parent? One of the things that we know about math is you have to do math in order to learn math. You have to experience difficulties with math problems. And so if you are in a math program online and you don't have a pencil and paper out, you're not really doing math. And that's been an important message for us to spread as we're going remote, as we're doing things with a variety of folks overseeing the teaching and learning situation. And having an orientation meeting or having some sort of regular contact that lays it out there is really important. What does it look like? How often are they going to be doing it? How do they access it? How do you know when they've started? How do you know when they're done? Those sorts of things are very important to communicate when you have it. So a lot of times that boils down to something very simple. Can you hand out some directions or guidelines that can be printed, that can be set aside, that can be used as a reminder, key things to keep in mind? And how are you going to provide that work back to your educators in order to help the student figure out where they were going wrong in the teaching and learning of that topic? If a student is not doing long division correctly, it's hard to assess long division without seeing their work in long division. And so figuring out what is your most efficient way of doing that, whether you're collecting things through your online classroom or some sort of forum that is a forum that is live and regular from the teachers to the students. It really depends from one situation to another, but I'd be happy to answer some other specific questions if you have any. What we found is also you're accessing an online program, and it's not a matter of whether students will misplace or forget usernames and passwords. It's how often and when. And so having a plan for how are you monitoring students? Are they getting in regularly? If not, it's probably time to proactively reach out and get a hold of them. I know in my case, with my students, with my kids here, uh, it, it was from day to day, it was different. And they would log in and sometimes they would see something right away and jump on it and get going with it, but there wasn't a regular time that everything was posted. So my teenager would log in, not see anything at 9:30 in the morning, but it was posted at 10 that day. And then he would log in again later on in the day, or at worst, we'd go and do something because it didn't look like anything was there. And then he'd come back and there'd be 2 days worth of work the next morning. And sometimes one class would post and the other one wouldn't. It made it very difficult to follow. And so what are you setting up for these high school or middle school type teaching and learning situations on how to do this if you aren't maintaining some sort of regular schedule, just like you would in a classroom? And so trying to figure out only different, but trying to figure out what that looks like in your situation with your parents is almost as important as it is setting up from day one with your students and taking them through the orientation of how your class works and the mechanics of it. And there just was very little of that going on this last spring. And so these gaps tend to widen as the irregularities popped up. And it wasn't because people weren't trying. It's because they lacked some of the preparation to really get them from that point to another. So that's the sort of thing that we're going through in both of these, whether it's parent-centered and teacher-supported, or in this case, this is another good example where we've met a lot with the educators. So it's very much educator-focused. They wanted to identify gaps and support struggling students so that by the time they hit the ground running for next fall, they had fewer gaps than where they started. And so we started with some professional development in late May and meetings to try to figure out what this looks like. We have a variety of online resources that are printable and customizable for users to put into place and pilot with their students, along with the ability to go in and take that initial test over the concepts and set up their learning path. We have to get in with the educators to interpret what the system is telling them, to say, this is what this group of students that showed up with especially low scores looks like they're going to struggle with. This is how much help they're going to need. This is where you should start them. Let's focus on that group first, get them started, get the expectations out to parents, get the expectations out to those students, and start working with teachers who are working with them to be successful in that distance learning model. So we took that, and that late May, they piloted with 7th, 8th, and 9th graders and had all of them take the test. And we focused in on the reports and tracking of those students that were most at risk to get them practice between June and August. And then really set a great plan so that then students in their school, this was a medium-sized school for us in Montana, but this school then was going to put every 5th through 12th grader through and do an initial diagnostic in early August, and move then to pull in with us and interpret those reports and plan for getting every student help, whether they were sort of on track, behind, or up to speed and probably able to work ahead. We want to get them more math practice in that August timeframe before they start school in late August. So then we get them thinking in that way, we get them supported, And we're using a foundational program to build into the fall. And they can use that then to supplement their instruction if they come back to face-to-face, if they're doing some sort of reduced time or blended model, or if they have to go back to remote teaching and learning in the fall. We are planning for all those contingencies with the team and helping them kind of think through what does that look like. But essentially, the behavior in the program is going to be the same whether they're sitting in a classroom on a remote or on a device versus sitting at home on a device. And so we're trying to really set up that flow of, and what we call the blended learning loop. A loop of blended learning is using what's going on online to inform instruction, and using that instruction to adjust what you're teaching, and having the students sit down at the computer with a plan based upon that instruction. And so if you have that loop going and in place, you're going to be successful. It's using what that system is telling you to inform your instruction and having a student sit at the computer with a plan. That's the easy way of putting everything that we're learning from any system and employing technology to assist us in our instruction. So let's see. Usernames and passwords, ugh. Yeah, it is. But the great thing, and what we would suggest if you can at all employ it, is the ability for whoever's working directly with those students to have access to reset them in the click of a button. Wherever possible, you don't want to hand off usernames and passwords only to your help desk, whoever that is, if it's you or someone else. The worst thing in the world is to have a student sitting there somewhat ready to learn, and a teacher ready to teach, and the technology not allowing them in. So whatever you can do to shortcut that, we have a variety of approaches to that, from running off the list of those usernames and passwords going into that first class and having them at your fingertips, or communicating those out directly to students in a welcome letter or whatever it might be. Those are two of the things that we just try to hit from the very beginning as we're getting any of these programs set up, whether it's a group of middle school students or a group of adults or a college class. So what we also are having great success with in our program is essentially it was the first model that we used for our program, which is having students prepare for college level math and college level English most recently. And so we have the ability to put the program into the hands of a college team, and that team can then decide what levels those students need to be ready for in order to be successful, whether they're doing a college placement exam or if they are doing some sort of soft placement based upon proof that you can do the skills. And we're seeing both of those models play out very successfully, and either supplement what they're trying to do with a placement exam if they're using some sort of high stakes exam, or if they're deciding that the high stakes exam they're going away from and they're doing some sort of multiple measure or some sort of soft placement that says, if you can prove that you know all these skills, we're going to move you into that level of math. And those programs are yielding success in our state. I'll just talk real briefly about one of those, but there's one university in our state that's using it to if a student isn't satisfied with the level, and that the test level that they take has 5 levels. It goes from pre-algebra at the lowest level up to college calculus readiness at the level 5. And if a student scores a 3, they're at the college algebra level. And so if a student comes in and scores a 1, 2, or a 3, and they're trying to go to a 3, 4, or a 5, they allow them to sign up for a goal with us, and they're advised into it. They have to pass that goal at a 90% or better, and then they're allowed to retake that placement exam. And that program, over the course of the first summer, there were 81 students that took that and did that program. And you could probably guess how many. I wish it was more interactive. I could ask a couple of questions, but how many of those 81 students, I guess, you can go to the chat. How many of those 81 students do you suppose increased their math placement exam score that successfully completed they were enrolled in a goal to try to get them to the next level and did it? 50%, 5 of the 81, 60%, half. Oddly enough, 81 out of 81 increased their scores. And what we proved out of that was, and this is something that you hear often, is I woke up on the wrong side of the bed. I wasn't ready to take the test. I really knew the material. I need to retake it and prove that I can get a higher score. What that university decided was that's not good enough. And we know that that really isn't true and doesn't really work. And so they put a hold in place, and they said, if you retake your college placement exam, you will be allowed to do that for free. We'll have advisors waiting on hand to enroll you in that next class. And if you're not happy with that initial placement, do this first. Do math first. And so they put that into place. And now over the course of 2 summers, we have firmed up our data on 2 summers out of the 3 that we've been doing this with them on. And their fall to fall retention of those students, well, let's just put that back out. What do you suppose the fall to fall, or the pass rate, excuse me, not fall to fall retention. What do you suppose the pass rate of those students that then subsequently enrolled in a class that did this program versus what you know about developmental math pass rates? What do you suppose that looks like? The pass rate of these students that did this program without being in the developmental class or that previous class that they would have tested into. 50% is a good guess because 50% is about the pass rate of a developmental math student right now. It's usually a coin flip of whether developmental math students will go from and pass a class. But the students that took the program passed their first math class after at a 90% rate. And so what we are essentially learning from this is the students that get the supplemental instruction that's somewhat self-guided, but have a firm goal in mind. They're given a reward of essentially being able to test out of a class. They still have to prove it by retaking the test, but they're given the opportunity. And when we go in and look and see that they've made improvements in the program and tested, that's the numbers that we're getting and seeing that this school is getting, not just us, but it's what we're seeing them do. And so we couldn't have this sort of soft placement or retesting college placement test prep going on without a local team that we're working with to advise students into it, to talk about the fact that you're going to get out of it what you put into it. It's a lot less intensive than our program that we might have to set up for a comprehensive program in a K-12 school. But it's no less important to have that team on the other end that can accurately set that up and help us pick what they want their students to focus on, set up those goals, set up a process for getting into it, set up a process then for dealing with the results and monitoring it. And so setting up those programs takes what we're going to be talking about later on this afternoon, some of the why and how of how we help set up those programs. But let's see, I can answer some questions if there are any. Down to about the last 10 minutes here. So I'll take a little bit of a change in direction here and talk about our second effort, which in the early days of our program, we really focused on that continuum of learning math from basic arithmetic up through pre-calculus and helping identify gaps and weaknesses and start helping address them for each student and helping instructors, teachers decide where they needed to focus their instruction, whether it be toward the most at-risk students, or I have some students that are advanced, they need a few details, and then we want to move them on to what's next. And so that has definitely proven successful. We've been doing that now since 2013 in our initial pilot phase up through now. And then we're about 2 years into, and actually in the session with me today is Verge Hale, our lead ambassador on our program. She was I see her picture. I don't know if everybody sees her picture, but she's participating in this session, and she's been our leader in helping us set up for our English language arts EdReady solution as well. And what we are really focusing on this summer, and we'll be starting this up going into the fall semester as well, which is creating critical readers and effective writers and supporting educators in filling in those gaps that have also been challenging. It's extremely challenging from a distance it's extremely challenging for any educator to assess writing and help students make improvements. It's doubly so when you can't be with them while they're writing. And so what we're trying to work with schools on then is, what does that look like when you automatically have less face-to-face time with a student, or assume that you might? How are you going to be able to do that? And how are you going to be able to utilize or leverage some technology to be able to help you in that endeavor? And so this really is what we're focused on in this effort, is trying to get some printable materials to schools to help them do that, and to help them learn offline and learn in that blended nature. So we have printable reading samples and writing prompts that can be used. And what we know about taking many of the standardized tests, and what we're hearing from people that are starting to use this system, is the challenge for them is getting students to be able to read on the screen and scan a whole document and then be able to efficiently answer those questions. You know, we were taught all these different ways to do that when we were taking a written test, but that's difficult. You can't highlight your screen as you're scrolling down through and reading a reading sample and leave it up there in many cases, in most assessments. And so how do you pull out the main points, and how do you focus on the questions to answer those and go back and scan and make notes in the margins? That's difficult. But how do you teach that skill when it's totally online? That's what the program also assists, what we hear educators talking about, one of the advantages of having an online system that can help with teaching of reading and writing skills. They've created a number of teaching guides and outlines to help support that. And that's our challenge, is getting some of these new ideas, teaching and learning with technology on these two topics, the math gaps and recovery of those gaps, or filling in of those gaps. And then the complex, for me, mystery of how to teach reading and writing, because I am not one of those. And so anyway, that's some of the things that we're working on. And In a program like ours, the technology enhancements that have come about that are allowing them to break that down, also having what is referred to in the EdReady system as an active reader. And so it goes along and highlights the words as it reads it, calls out key vocabulary or glossary terms that can be clicked on to then be integrated in and go to a glossary to be able to look it up. We also have one Chrome plugin that we've had success with as well is Select and Speak, and using Select and Speak to be able to break down reading samples or allow it to read out loud to a student at times. But the active reader has largely made that less important since that's now integrated into the system and it does it for those larger reading samples. But on smaller reading samples, or if you are just browsing to a website and you have a student either that needs that for accessibility reasons or you want to be able to have it be read to them, that's something that you can do to start breaking down the ability to read and interpret what's going on the screen in front of them. But we found that to be really, both of those things to be really important aspects to make an impact on creating better readers. So any specific questions, things that you were dealing with back on the very first question with us? I saw some folks out there that were working in primary, secondary, intermediate schools, some that are working in K-12 overall, higher ed, adult ed. We work with all of the above. I'd be happy to answer some questions and talk about some of your challenges in meeting this complex filling of gaps, identifying and filling of gaps, or working with struggling readers and writers. So Amy or Melanie, you're talking about working options for dyslexic students. Can you, some of the font options. One of the things that we have been lucky enough to have is inside of our system that we use. We've been running accessibility updates on that with the people that program it since the very beginning, and there's accessibility features inside of it that will allow for, say, more contrast in color, different fonts. Looks like you have a great link there about good fonts for dyslexia. Thanks for sharing. We're down to the last few minutes. What can I answer? I'll go ahead and download that and just open it up for you. It's coming up slowly here. There's a good question. I see one here. Has EdReady found an amount of time in minutes or hours where students get fatigued when working on EdReady coursework each day that we can go by? Very interesting. I haven't specifically looked at the amount of time until they get fatigued, but one of the key features that we were finding in a lot of our most focused implementations was an amount of time within the system before we noticed meaningful growth that helped impact the outcome after they left the system. And so across the board, what we were seeing in our early pilots and in other colleges and universities, especially at that level, because they were the most focused usually, rather than a supplemental classroom situation, this would be more of a student individual situation, and it might look like a summer program in an intermediate or secondary school, but it would be one of those bridge programs like we're talking about, where they're preparing for those placement exams and such. In order to get to that threshold where they were starting to make an improvement on a score, we saw in our early pilots, it was somewhere between 8 and 12 hours of focused study time. That's somewhat hard to measure for those of you that have looked at a lot of server logs and trying to tell how much time a student is spending in the system. That's very subjective, and sometimes can be mismeasured in a lot of different ways. But without going into all the yeah buts, what we found is that 8 to 12 hours was really where we started to see a difference in those scores, and especially the results on externally measurable things like placement tests or standardized tests that improved from one time to another. And so that program that I was talking about at a university earlier in what their impact was, I forgot. One of the requirements that they said was not only did you have to get 90%, but you had to spend 20 hours in the system. And so a lot of times those students were going and taking that first goal that they had to go from, say, a level 2 to a level 3, and then enrolling in another one and going from level 3 to a level 4, or going back in and reviewing the ones that they had the most challenge on to show more time learning in the system. And what that 20-hour requirement did is move that number up to those, in the first summer, 100% that followed those directions improved their score. And then overall, in the 90 percentile of students that pass their subsequent math class, that's where those differences really started to show up. So I can't say when they get fatigued for sure, but we do know a little bit more than we did when we first started about what the success rate looks like after you spend time actually on learning materials and not just clicking multiple choice tests and answering questions, but spending time engaging with materials. Let's see, varied by age. Carly, are you talking about our program?
I was kind of making it a secondary question to Whitney's.
Okay.
So, if you noticed that it varied by age or anything like that.
What most of the successful models that are using in supplemental in nature have a set schedule where they may be delivering some of their own content and then having students take place in the online resources and dividing that up. If you're doing it in a classroom, you don't want someone sitting on the computer for an hour any more than you want them sitting and listening to you drone on and on for an hour. And so breaking that up into we're going to have focused instruction time for everybody. We'll have focused hands-on math practice with an instructor going on for another 15 minutes. And then we'll have a station of Chromebooks set up for everybody to get their time in Ed Ready, and we'll see successful implementations maybe in a blended learning model where they'll have a rotation between those 2 or 3 stations working together in concert. And so you'll have small group instruction going on in different areas, or breaking them up a little bit in their time frame. So you're not doing all of one or the other. And that's when you can manage that in a classroom. And so moving that into more of a remote learning situation, you have to kind of balance that and think through what that looks like in your directions to students. How much time are you going to have them doing practice versus and learning materials versus how much time are you going to have them being assessed? And so longer than we have right now, that'd be our next hour, that we could go into more specifics on that. But does that kind of get to what you're talking about there?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Well, it looks like we're past the 11:50 time. And so I want everybody to be able to get their wellness break before they move on to whatever's next. But I'd be happy if you have any follow-ups to reach out. And this afternoon, I'll be doing another session at 4, and it'll take a little different angle on all of this, but be related.
Thanks, Ryan.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Ryan. And another reminder that this is, this has been recorded, so that if you missed anything, you can go back and watch later. And everybody have a great break, and see you next